It is the Fantasy Life Show here on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. I'm Adam Ronis along with Matthew Freedman. He's going to be with me for the first hour. Dwain McFarland will join me in hour number 2 as Kendall Valenzuela is out sick today. So we hope she feels better. Matthew, it's been a while. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's great to be on the show. In the old days, quote unquote old days, a couple of years ago, my intro music used to be Taylor Swift. So we've come a long way since then.
I'm pretty sure you're not a Taylor Swift guy, right? Just a guess?
Yeah, no, that was almost part of the bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a big Taylor Swift person either. And anytime music is played from her on the show, Kendall acts like it's me. It is not. That's not my type of music. But we got a lot to get to here today. We got Thursday Night Football tonight. I'm not going to say it's going to be an exciting one. I know right before the show you were like, I'm going to have to see if I can find something to bet tonight, because that's probably the real lone reason why you're going to watch this game, unless you're a fan of the Patriots or the Jets. With New England favored by 12.5, a total of 43.5. So has anything caught your eye yet, or are you still searching?
Yeah, I mean, on the fan front of this, I will say it's really encouraging to see how Drake May has developed in his sophomore season. I mean, kind of MVP caliber type of performance, what we've seen out of him so far. And it's not just dink and dunk stuff. That might be what you think if you looked only at his completion percentage, which is near the top in the league. But he's actually been incredible when he's throwing the ball downfield. And it seems all the more incredible when you take into account, I'd say, like kind of like the lack of pass catching weapons that he has, or at least like the lack of established studs that he has in the receiving unit. So I think that makes it all the more incredible. That said, I'm looking at the game model that we have, the projections that we have at Fantasy Life, and I actually do see some value in the Jets. And I hate to say that, because I mean, 12.5 is such a high number. We have this projected at 10. And I would say that I think probably one of the main things in this, so two things. One, just the injuries that we see with the Patriots right now. Of course, Garrett Wilson also out for the Jets, but a question would be, how much does that matter when your passing game sucks anyway? But so one might be kind of the injuries would benefit the Jets a little bit, and then also the home field advantage. The Patriots do not have that strong of a home field advantage if you kind of look at their numbers over the past 3 and 5 years. And then home field advantage, it's not a static thing. It's something that, kind of can change based on other factors. Like if you're playing a team in your division, if you're playing a team that plays on the same type of surface, if you're playing a team that plays outdoors and you also play outdoors. So the Patriots don't have that high of a home field advantage anyway. And then all of the advantages that they do have within it are kind of cut down because the Jets are in division, the Jets play outdoors, the Jets play on turf. So all of these things. So it's just like, I can see why our projections say that this number should be 10 and the market is at 2.5 or 12.5, because the market historically hasn't been great at pricing some of these things in. So I look at that and I think, oh man, there's actually maybe some theoretical value on the Jets. That said, the Jets seem like an extremely unserious organization, and I don't know if I want to be betting on that. So that's my way of saying, like, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, I think maybe more player props might be the direction to go tonight. The other factor, too, is that we don't even know who the Jets quarterback is. No, we think it's Justin Fields, right? Yeah. I mean, Aaron Glenn, what are you doing, man? It's like every week he's doing this with these press conferences. He didn't even want to reveal injuries this week. It's been comical with the Jets. We do know, though, Rhamondre Stevenson has been ruled out. So he's out with that toe injury once again. And we saw last week when Terrell Jennings went out early with the knee injury, he is listed as questionable, so we'll have to see if he goes. We finally saw TreVeyon Henderson get the bulk of the workload, and he broke off 2 long plays, including one for a touchdown. Finally had a game that fantasy players have been waiting for. Although the week before, if you used him with Stevenson out, he did get you double-digit points in PPR, but lost a touchdown to Jennings. 14 carries for 147 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns last week. So if Jennings suits up tonight, because we did see Jennings get the ball early in that game, and then obviously they had to go to Henderson. But if Jennings does suit up, do you still think it's going to be mostly Henderson tonight?
If, as you mentioned, based on what we saw with Jennings getting the early usage, if he suits up, and I think there's a decent chance he does suit up because although he's questionable, he practiced limitedly every day. So normally if a guy practices every day, the odds are greater than 50-50 that he's playing in the upcoming game. If he is active, he being Jennings, I think it's something pretty close to the split that we saw in that first game without Stevenson, where Jennings ended up getting a significant amount of work and the goal line work specifically. And we did see Henderson get the long touchdowns. Last week, he did get some opportunities inside the 5-yard line and he did not convert them, which, is kind of the sign of like, oh man, they might go back to Jennings inside the 5-yard line if he's healthy. So a lot depends on whether we see Jennings. If Jennings is out, Henderson is just like a smash must start. If Jennings is in, you're still probably starting TreVeyon Henderson, but you just know that he's not locked in for those goal line touches.
Yeah, I mean, I have Henderson in a few leagues. I am going to start him, but it would be slightly concerning if Jennings isn't there because it seems like Henderson between the tackles is probably where New England is kind of hesitant to use him. And that's why there was a report from Dan Graziano of ESPN saying when Stevenson returns, he's going to go back to the role he had. And Henderson will maybe cut into the workload a little bit more, maybe see him more in the passing game. He wasn't heavily involved in the passing game last week, but if you do have Henderson, you are going to start him tonight. But if Jennings is active, you probably will see him get a lot of the goal line stuff too. So that is a little bit of a concern. For the Giants, Jameis Winston is going to start on Sunday, assuming Jackson Dart doesn't clear concussion protocol. We've seen a lot. Sometimes these guys don't clear it, and they miss at least a week. Winston, we know what he brings to the field. It's some excitement. It's taking shots downfield. It is also a lot of mistakes and turnovers. So how do you view the Giants offense with Winston at quarterback this week?
Yeah, to echo your point, normally when a guy suffers an in-game concussion, the odds are that he's out the next week. So I do think it is likely to be Jameis Winston. I mean, it's so unfortunate. I mean, obviously for a number of reasons, unfortunate that Malik Neighbors is out, but Neighbors with Winston would have been really entertaining to watch. And the number one receiver that the Giants have, Wan'Dale Robinson, like he has the exact opposite skill set of what you would want for a wide receiver who's matched up with Jameis Winston, who has a really strong arm and like the mindset of aggression where he's just more than willing, like highly desirous to attack downfield. And that's not where Wan'Dale Robinson wins. So maybe it's a Darius Slayton kind of game. And those are almost impossible to predict. But Darius Slayton has those games where it's like he pops off for like 100 yards and a touchdown. It seems like Jameis Winston is the type of quarterback who could facilitate that type of game from Darius Slayton. But I would say I know Russell Wilson isn't anyone's favorite quarterback at this point, but the move from Wilson to Winston seems like a lateral move. Although it's a stylistic change. You're trading like one kind of backup quarterback for another kind of backup quarterback. At least with Winston, I feel like you have the upside of volatility. I think, don't have that so much with Russell Wilson at this point in his career. So I don't think it's great for Wan'Dale Robinson. It might give a slight boost to Darius Slayton, but overall, I don't think it really changes much in terms of what you expect from the Giants offense in totality.
Yeah, and as you alluded to with Slayton, like he's been so close to having these big games. He had that offensive pass interference call against the Eagles that I thought was a bad call, would have been a long touchdown. It was called back, so he doesn't have the big game. He had a drop pass against the 49ers. He had the hamstring injury last week where he left the game, came back, had 4 for 89. Didn't practice yesterday, too, with that hamstring injury, but again, Wednesday practice, so could be good to go. I don't really worry about guys missing Wednesday practice, especially guys dealing with injuries this late in the season. More often than not, they're going to sit. It feels like A.J. Brown has been sitting many times when you have him in your starting lineup. And obviously, he went a little viral for comments he made on a stream the other day saying, if you got me on fantasy, get rid of me. And then spoke to the media yesterday and didn't apologize about what he said. And he's clearly frustrated with the offense, and you could understand. Just 3 targets this past week. What are you doing if you have A.J. Brown? Like, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and it feels like if you bench him, he's going to go off and have a big game, and then if you put him in the lineup, he has these down games because he's had some really low floor games. It was bad last year, but this year we've seen 2 for 13, 2 for 7, 1 for 8. I mean, that just crushes you. So, how are you handling A.J. Brown, whether you have him, rankings? Like, what do you do going forward with him?
Yeah, it has been so bad. And to echo your point, he has been such a massive liability in guillotine leagues where, like floor is valuable, and AJ Brown has gotten you chopped, multiple times. Multiple different fantasy managers have gone to the guillotine because of AJ Brown. But I will say this, and then one more thing to echo your point. In only 2 games this year, he's had 12 or more fantasy points. Just absolutely unreal stuff. But this feels like a bounce back spot. Just because of like all of like the sort of like the quote unquote like market dynamics of like people are just now like trying to sell AJ Brown for whatever they can get. They're contemplating benching him. This has become like a media thing where like AJ Brown is answering questions. Teammates are having to talk about this. Nick Sirianni is having to address this. It just feels like, okay, the pendulum has swung too far. And then you look at the matchup. The Lions are number 28 in defensive pass DVOA against number 1 wide receivers. They could be without 3 starters in the secondary this week, and DJ Reed, Terrion Arnold, and free safety Kirby Joseph. It just feels like a spot where I would be I wouldn't say I would expect an AJ Brown bounce back because no one should be confident in anything regarding AJ Brown at this point. But I'm not benching him this week. I guess that's the way of putting it. This is a week where I am not benching him. And if he kills me, then I'm dead and I don't have to worry about it. But after that, I would bench him. But this week, this is like the last week to where it's like I'm starting him, but do I have confidence in it? No. AJ Brown at this point instills zero confidence.
Yeah, and we've kind of seen this situation before where there's some complaining and he gets fed the football, has the big week. And look, I will say this. You said if he doesn't get it done this week, that's it, you're done? No, come on. Do you know who they face in week 12? Dallas Cowboys.
I know,
There's no way
I
you're
know,
benching him,
I
right?
know.
You must have forgot about that.
No, I did not forget. It's just I take this week by week.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking ahead and I saw the Eagles. I mean, the Cowboys. I was like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
not going to happen. So Marvin Harrison, appendectomy, so he's going to miss at least 1 week. We've seen guys sometimes miss more than 1 week with this, so we'll just have to wait and see. And it's unfortunate because with Jacoby Brissett, we've seen Harrison and Trey McBride really put up good numbers as opposed to Kyler Murray. So is there anyone that you see that will benefit that maybe you could? I've seen people add Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. Do you see either of those guys being someone that you could roll with this week?
I mean, if you're absolutely desperate and playing in like a 2014 league, then like maybe, I mean, but like you have to be down so bad to be contemplating starting Greg Dortch. You either down bad or you're Ian Hartitz.
Yeah.
One of those two, but I mean, the setup you have to acknowledge is decent. Jacoby Brissett has elevated what we have seen from the passing game. Marvin Harrison is out. Zay Jones is also out. And so now you have only kind of one of the original 3 wide receivers in Michael Wilson and then Greg Dortch as the rotational guy who now gets elevated. And we have seen Dortch when he has been a starter, and there have been other players out around him. You have seen him get decent usage as the slot option in that offense. I mean, that said, do you actually want to start Greg Dortch this weekend? Michael Wilson? Absolutely not. But if you are, for some reason, entirely desperate, I can see it. The 49ers are number 28 in defensive dropback EPA, and the Cardinals do have a legit home field advantage. This game is in Arizona over the past 16 games. So the past year, the Cardinals have the number 5 home field advantage in the league. So like there are some positive things about this, but in general, no, I would not want to start Greg Dortch or Michael Wilson.
We don't know exactly what is going on with JK Dobbins. We know he has a foot injury. There's been some discussion that he could land on injured reserve. That hasn't happened yet, but we did hear Sean Payton say that RJ Harvey will have more opportunities with Dobbins potentially out. We know that Harvey has actually put up some decent numbers recently outside of the game last week against Vegas. mainly on scoring touchdowns, and we warned people be careful about starting him because there was limited touches and he was scoring touchdowns. That would not last. It didn't last week. We've seen the explosiveness, but we also seen Sean Payton with this backfield. You got Tyler Bidet there and Jaleel McLaughlin. I mean, look, if you have Harvey and Dobbins out, you're playing them, but how much do you see the workload increasing considering what we've seen in this backfield this year?
So, based on what we've seen from Sean Payton's career and then what we have seen out of the Broncos in general, 14 carries is the most that RJ Harvey has had in his career. I don't, and that was in a 28-3 win, home win over the Bengals. I really don't see him going any higher than that mark, but like that is kind of the realm of where he could be. Like 12 to 14 carries, 3 to 5 targets. That is startable. Like that's someone that you are putting into your lineup if he's getting that kind of usage and JK Dobbins is out. But you're not expecting 20 touches from him. Like that's just the kind of thing that tends not to happen in a Sean Payton offense.
Yeah, and hopefully it's more in the passing game. That's where he's shown the ability to be explosive. And what is going to be another good game this week? We have quite a few with the Broncos hosting the Chiefs in that 4 o'clock window, and Kansas City is favored in that game. A very critical game for Kansas City. Could you imagine? Because right now they're out of the playoffs. We know that's not going to happen. We know they're going to get in, but if they lose this game, they fall to 5-5. Denver would go to 9-2, and I don't think we believe Denver is that good at all compared
Yeah,
to their record.
absolutely. Yeah, it's an amazing AFC bracket that we have right now where you're looking at some of these teams and you're like, there's a chance that one of, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes is not in the playoffs. And it's like that doesn't seem like it's possible. It is possible. And then you think, all right, if all of those three guys are going to get in, what is the team that is getting bumped out of the playoffs that is currently projected for the playoffs? I think we are going to have a fantastic last third of the season in the AFC. And as you mentioned, that game coming up with the Broncos and the Chiefs is just like an example of the type of high leverage matchup we're going to see for the next month and a half.
Yeah, we need those quarterbacks in the playoffs for that AFC picture to make it interesting. So hopefully we get that. When we return, we'll look at the rankings, risers and fallers. And speaking of the Broncos, Bo Nix, he's been a top 10 fantasy quarterback this year, but can we trust him this week against Kansas City? We'll let you know next. It is Fantasy Life here on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. See, they trolling us now. I think that's Taylor Swift. I'm not sure. I'll turn to Matthew on his expertise here.
I do not know.
I
do
think
not
it
know
is,
if that is Taylor Swift.
and they're trolling us because they know
Yeah.
neither of us are big fans. But okay, I think that is. People probably laughing at us like, "How do you not know that?" Well, sorry, we don't. That's not our genre. Let's take a look at some of the rankings, risings, and fallers this week. Brought up Bo Nix. Like I think Bo Nix has been pretty bad this year. I know from a fantasy perspective, the numbers look pretty good. He's taken advantage of some favorable matchups. The Cowboys, the Giants, when it was all in the fourth quarter, where he had 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. When he's played a bad defense, he's come through. He's going up against the Chiefs this week, and the consensus rankings at Fantasy Life have him at QB 17. This is a bad spot. Like, I've been getting asked questions on Bo Nix and someone else. I usually go someone else. How do you feel about Bo Nix this week against Kansas City?
I have him as my QB 18. I bumped him up a little bit this morning. I think I had him maybe at QB 20. I was like, it feels weird to have him that low given the production, the fantasy production. But I will say Bo Nix is the exact type of quarterback I do not like starting or do not like having in fantasy. Like I don't like quarterbacks who I think aren't that good in reality, but people act like they are good. I just, Bo Nix had an acceptable rookie season, especially from the fantasy perspective because of what he did on the ground as a rusher. But it's not like he's an elite runner, right? And as a passer, his numbers were okay, but they weren't great. And because of his elevated age, I kind of had the thought that maybe he wouldn't really take a second season step forward. That maybe he had kind of peaked a little bit as a rookie. And I think I wouldn't say that's 100% accurate, but I think that's maybe directionally accurate. And the fact is, it doesn't seem as if Sean Payton wants to unleash him. Like it doesn't seem his coach really trusts him. So given the matchup and given that I just think Bo Nix isn't actually that good, like he's not, I think, a good enough real life player to be like, oh, you start him no matter what. And he's not a good enough fantasy player with his rushing to say, oh, you start him no matter what. So I think this is a clear benching situation unless you're in super flex or 2 QB leagues.
Quarterback who has risen up is Joe Flacco. He's up to the consensus QB 11 on Fantasy Life, and we know what he has done since coming over to Cincinnati, putting the ball in the air often, targeting T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, especially Chase, and a matchup against Pittsburgh where we have seen their defense play better the last couple weeks a little bit. But we did see that matchup on a Thursday night a few weeks ago where he went for 342 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. So you have to be pretty confident if you're starting him this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like Flacco, and I think Flacco as an underdog is like the exact situation you want to be in. And of course, he's going to be an underdog every game because his defense is so terrible that the team has to throw the ball as much as they have been just to keep it competitive. And as you mentioned, we have seen with that offense them be able to put up some real points. And the great thing is he has good players around him who can help uplift his fantasy production, to where it's like, hey, if he throws the ball to T. Higgins might be able to do the rest of the work on his own. The same with Jamar Chase, right? And Chase Brown is also a decent pass catching back as well. So I like this situation for Joe Flacco. I have him as my QB 10. And honestly, like I wanted to have him higher. I didn't think I could put him above Caleb Williams. I couldn't put him above Matthew Stafford, but QB 10, like that's pretty respectable for a dude who's like 40 years old at this point.
You bring up Stafford. Someone was asking me a question about potentially benching him this week because of the matchup with Seattle. I understand the defense has been good, but like, is there, unless you have, now there's a possibility that you have like a top tier quarterback and you drafted Stafford as a QB2, maybe you have a decision, but like, does it matter right now with Stafford who he's facing with the way he's playing?
I don't think so.
Right?
I mean, the dude has 4 touchdowns in each of the past 3 games, at least 4 touchdowns. I mean, he's just been incredibly efficient. He's not throwing interceptions, not turning the ball over. Obviously, he gives you nothing with his legs, but that passing game is functioning at such a high level for the Rams to where it's like the opposite of the Bo Nix situation, to where it's like Matthew Stafford is such a good real life quarterback at this point, and he's in such great form right now, like legit MVP form right now, that there's no way I think you can consider benching him unless, as you mentioned, you have one of the other elite guys and Stafford was someone you drafted is your QB2.
Derrick Henry is down this week. He's the RB 15 in consensus rankings on Fantasy Life, and we know he lost that 1 yard touchdown last week to Justice Hill. He is averaging 4.8 yards per carry. It feels worse just compared to last year. 6 rushing touchdowns on the season, going up against the Cleveland Browns, and their run defense has been good this year. What have you seen from Henry? Do you expect him to get better with Lamar Jackson back the rest of the way? Is there signs that he's slowing down? And thoughts on the matchup here against Cleveland?
Yeah, it's a weird situation because on the one hand, the Ravens are favored by 7.5 points. That is kind of historically like the type of situation, Derrick Henry is a big favorite where you absolutely would think he goes off. But as you mentioned, a tough run defense he's going against with the Browns. And then the Browns, under defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, have had really significant home away splits at home over the past 2.5 years. They have allowed 17.4 points per game. Away, they've allowed 29.2 points per game. And those splits have become even more extreme this year. 13.5 points at home is what the Browns are allowing. And so it's just like a different defense that they are going against the Ravens when they are playing the Browns in Cleveland. And so that also gives me some pause here. And then there's the fact that even though the Ravens on offense, since Lamar Jackson has returned, the Ravens have been good. It hasn't been flowing. The offense hasn't been flowing through Derrick Henry. And they are spelling him some with Keaton Mitchell. They are using Justice Hill as, the pass catching back. There's just increasingly less and less of a role for Derrick Henry in that offense. And that's not to say he's not still like one of the best running backs in the league. If you have him, you're starting him, all of that. It just means that like he's not getting the pile on usage that he got last year.
Yeah, and the touchdowns haven't been there as much, and we know it's very important for him since he is not involved in the passing game. Did face Cleveland back in week 2, had 11 carries for 23 yards. So that was a 41-17 win for Baltimore. We've seen Jauan Jennings slowly start to get more involved in offense. He's been banged up. He said he had like 17 different injuries and was playing through it. And we've seen him play a little bit better the last few weeks. He scored a touchdown in 2 straight games. He's up to wide receiver 23 in the consensus rankings, although I guess there is a chance that Ricky Pearsall actually returns this week. He's back at practice, but how do you feel about Jennings this week going up against Arizona?
Yeah, I think Ricky Pearsall probably sits one more week. I mean, we've seen Brock Purdy at practice for the last month, and so
Well,
like
he might
Ricky
play
Pierce,
too, they say.
yeah, sure. They've been saying that for the past month, so that might happen. But Ricky Pearsall, I'm a little more skeptical that he returns this week. We just kind of have to wait and see. But Jauan Jennings, since returning to full practice, right? Because there's a difference between the guys who are playing, but they're clearly hampered. But if a guy's practicing in full every day, even though you might be listed with an injury, I think you're basically like you're good enough to go play football. So since Jauan Jennings returned to full practice in week 8, he has an 83% route rate, a 24% target share, and a 33% share of air yards, and a 50% share of end zone targets. And all that information is from the utilization report we have on the site. And so the 33% air yard share and 50% of end zone targets, like those are legit, like wide receiver one type of numbers. And then you look at the matchup. The Cardinals have had injuries to their starting perimeter cornerbacks in Will Johnson and Max Melton. So have to look at the injury report to see how those guys are progressing. But Jauan Jennings without Ricky Pearsall, potentially with Brock Purdy going against a team with injured cornerbacks, that feels like a pretty good scenario.
It seems like it's been a pretty good scenario for Cade Otton lately, and he's the consensus tight end 9 on the rankings at fantasylife.com. Chris Godwin was limited in practice. I don't expect him to play. Same with Bucky Irving. I'm hoping he plays, but we'll see. But we've seen when they have multiple receivers out, that's when Cade Otton benefits. We saw a stretch last year, no Evans, no Godwin. He went off, and he's been having some good games lately, especially at the tight end position if you needed someone to fill in. So how do you see Cade Otton this week going up against the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, 12 targets last week coming out of the bye. That's just great usage. And then you look at the games before the bye, the 6 games before the bye, sorry, 4 games before the bye, 5, 6, 9, and 5 targets. So it's not like Trey McBride level usage, but I mean, if you're getting 5 targets as your floor from your fantasy tight end, that's something that you can live with. And, the upside for more from there is very intriguing. So, I have him as the wide receiver, sorry, as the tight end 9. I think it's not like quite in must start territory, but more often than not, that's someone you are locking into your lineup.
Doesn't feel like people feel good about locking Xavier Worthy into the lineup right now. He's the consensus wide receiver 37. We knew when Rashee Rice comes back, he was going to take a hit. It's, again, only a few games, but we have seen Worthy's numbers take a dip. Even before that, it's not like he was great anyway without Rice, but what is your outlook for Worthy going forward? Can it get better, or is this just what we're going to expect from him with Rice soaking up so many other targets?
Well, what is encouraging about Xavier Worthy is that he's in an offense that passes the ball a lot. It's one of the better offenses in the league, and he still gets that usage occasionally as a runner. So, that just gives him kind of the little extra opportunity to create a big play. But yeah, just 6 targets per game in the 3 games he has this year with Rashee Rice. Now, because he's on the field so much, running routes, still getting some regular targets, and then the occasional usage as a runner, that at some point a big game is going to happen. He's just like a boom bust type of player. At some point, he's going to have the 100-yard, 2 touchdown game. You just have no idea of when it's coming. And especially at this point in the season, that kind of unreliability is something that you do not want in your fantasy lineup.
The Chiefs seems to have some reliability on Kareem Hunt. He's the consensus RB28. Isaiah Pacheco, it looks like he might miss another week. We saw when he was out before their bye, they did not increase the usage for Brashard Smith, going up here against Denver this week for Kareem Hunt. I mean, look, we know he's kind of dependent on a touchdown. He's not explosive. He's not going to break big plays. But uh, how do you see Hunt going up against Denver this week?
I mean, it's a tough matchup. You expect him to get, let's say like 10 to 12 carries and 2 to 4 targets. In a Patrick Mahomes offense, especially without Isaiah Pacheco there to still the goal line work, that's good enough for like low end RB2. And he has scored a touchdown in each of the past 2 games. He does get that work. Actually, sorry, 3 touchdowns over the past 2 games. So he does get that goal line work, which is encouraging. But yeah, it's just I wouldn't say it's touchdown or bust, but you're not happy with the fantasy production if you do not get that touchdown from him.
Buffalo could be without Dalton Kincaid this week. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. A lot of talk about their receivers and how it's been a problem. Khalil Shakir has been the one consistent guy. Again, doesn't have a high ceiling, but how much do you like Shakir this week, in which the Bills need to bounce back after that awful performance against Miami? They'll be home against Tampa Bay this week. So, what are your thoughts on Shakir?
Yeah, I always like Shakir probably more than I should. He's always been pretty efficient with the opportunities that he's gotten. I just feel like he doesn't get as many opportunities as you want him to. But 24 targets is what he has seen since the week 7 bye. Without Dalton Kincaid, who I don't think plays this week, he could see more usage. And then the Bucks, they have a rookie third rounder at slot in cornerback Jacob Parrish. And I know that the team like is theoretically high on him, but if you can tell me that I'm going to get Shakir with extra usage going against a rookie cornerback in the slot, like I'm going to take that. So I do like Shakir this week as an elevated floor play.
Yeah, and he does have a high floor every week. There's no question about it, especially in the PPR. You're looking at 10 to 12 points every week. And if you could somehow find the end zone, only 3 touchdowns on the season, but he does give you that high floor every single week. We talk about guillotine league players in the high floor. He's never on that most chop list. We go
Yeah.
over it every week. You mentioned A.J. Brown. It feels like he's on it almost every single week because, those 1 for 8, 2 for 13 games. But Shakir, that's the difference too in the guillotine league format. A player like Shakir is a lot more valuable there because you're going to get that consistent 10 to 14 points on a given week.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I like Shakir more than I should anyway. So I'm probably going to be all the more enthusiastic about the extra opportunities he might get with Kincaid out.
All right, when we return, we'll take a look at some red flag, green flag players, including Kenneth Walker. That is ahead. It is the Fantasy Life Show here on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. It is the Fantasy Life Show here on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Adam Ronis and Matthew Freedman. Make sure you check out all our work, fantasylife.com. Rankings, projections, the utilization report, and a ton of articles from Matthew Freedman as well. He's got his wide receiver breakdown for the week, so make sure you go check that out on fantasylife.com. Let's take a look at some red flag, green flag players for the week. And boy, I don't know if you have Kenneth Walker on your fantasy team this year, but if you do, it is absolutely frustrating. I actually did like him going into the year. I actually don't have him in any redraft leagues. I probably do have him in some best ball. But boy, every week you're hoping that it changes and it doesn't. We're seeing Zach Charbonnet continue to get those red zone carries. And last week, I guess the game was a blowout. They were in control. It was 28-0, just like that. But we saw 44% of the snaps for Walker, 37% for Charbonnet. Week 9, we finally saw Walker overtake Charbonnet, but 3 touchdowns on the season for Kenneth Walker. The volume is just not there. Do you see it changing at all at any point? I talk about this with Kendall. We know she's a big Seahawks fan. She thinks it's because they're trying to preserve Walker and keep him healthy. The team is winning. They're 7-2. But we all see that Walker is the better running back. He's more explosive. But the Seahawks are just not going that way. So is this just going to be the way it is the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think so. They have almost zero incentive to change with their usage patterns with these running backs because, as you said, they're winning. And as Kendall said, they're probably looking with an eye to the postseason and wanting to keep Kenneth Walker fresh for what they hope is a championship contending run. And I'm in a couple of guillotine leagues because of the way that they're structured. There are a lot of players who should, you would think, kind of like quote unquote, should be rostered, but who are available on waivers. And so, I look in these leagues and I see Kenneth Walker on waivers, and I think, or he's just sitting there. It's post waivers. You can just press the add button. And I look and I think I got to get this guy on my team, right? And then I look at my team and I'm like, no, he probably belongs on waivers. And that's just the situation that we're in. And it's not because he's not talented. Like, I think he's one of the most exciting running backs we have in the league. Like, I think he's in that Jonathan Taylor type of mold. He just doesn't get that usage. And I don't think we're going to see any sort of change in that backfield.
Yeah, it is very frustrating if you have him. I feel bad for those people with Walker because more often than not, he went in round 4. So that was a player that you are counting on to be the centerpiece of your team, and you can't even get him into your starting lineup. It has been that bad. Trey Tucker, he had a 100% snap rate last week. And as we know, anytime you see the Dallas Cowboys defense on the opposite side, you are salivating and you want to get your players in. I know you wrote about Tucker getting the ideal matchup this week. So we know the Vegas offense can be volatile. It was really bad against Denver. That was a short week, though. They were coming off overtime, division game on the road. A Cowboys coming off a bye week. So how much do you like Trey Tucker this week?
Yeah, I like that Raiders offense more than I probably should. As you mentioned, the Cowboys are coming off of the bye, but you do have the Raiders coming off of the quote unquote mini bye because they played on Thursday night football. So the benefit that the Cowboys get from the bye is minimized a little bit. The Raiders playing their second straight game at home. The Cowboys are number 1 in most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks and wide receivers. And if you look at Geno Smith as the facilitator in that offense, what he has done in the 3 games against the other kind of quote unquote like terrible defenses that they played against, the Commanders, the Bears, the Jags, all of those teams are top 5 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Geno Smith has averaged 22.1 fantasy points per game. And so you kind of extrapolate that out to the guys that he's going to be passing to. And it's a similar situation for those guys. So Trey Tucker, I think an inconsistent player, but at least he's on the field for 100% of the snaps, running 100% of the routes. He has the ceiling potential. 9.9 yards per target this year is what we've seen out of him. And he also gets involved a little bit as a runner with 6 carries this season. So he has potential. And then, of course, the matchup. Cowboys number 1 and largest fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers, and number 1 cornerback Trayvon Diggs is on IR with a concussion. So all of that is a good setup for Trey Tucker. Whether or not he actually does anything with that, whether he pays off, that's just the fantasy gods. Who knows how they're going to flip that coin? But at least like the path is cleared for production.
Christian Watson with a average depth of target of 25.9. He's been back for 3 games, and I've always been a big Christian Watson fan, although I did not draft him or pick him up off waivers. I'm surprised that he's been looked this good so quickly. I mean, the snaps have gone up each week from 56 to 66 to 82% this past week. They're obviously dealing with some injuries. Matthew Golden was out this past week. We saw Romeo Dobbs leave the game. It looks like he'll be good to go this week, but I'm really surprised at how quickly Watson has been productive on this team and going up against the Giants this week. So are you to the point where you feel confident to get Christian Watson in your lineup if you have him?
Confident? No. But, I do think more often than not, if I have him and I'm in that desperate situation of like, okay, I'm going against a juggernaut. I need to get a little bit lucky. Then because of the upside that he has with that high A dot, he's someone I would be considering this week. It's really annoying how the Packers distribute their usage with those wide receivers. Like, hey, can you just give us a wide receiver one? Like, I don't even care who it is at this point. Just give us that guy so we know, hey, this is the one to put into our starting lineup. And it's going to get even muddier when Jaden Reed returns. But for right now, yes, I do think the explosive element in that offense is now Christian Watson. And although he hasn't had the utilization we would want in terms of the targets, just 4 targets in each of the 3 games, at least he's being targeted downfield, and at least he is increasingly running more routes each game, which at some point means I think he's going to pop off with a pretty big performance.
Yeah, what you mentioned about the Packers' lack of a number one is the reason why I have no Packers receivers this year on my fantasy teams. And they were cheap. You could have gotten them real late, but just such a headache with the way they spread the ball around. When we return, we'll take a look at some more red flag, green flag players, including Justin Jefferson coming off a down game. Will he bounce back? We'll let you know next. It is Fantasy Life here on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. It is Fantasy Life. Adam Ronis and Matthew Freedman as we're wrapping up hour one here, flying by, having a lot of fun. Looking at some red flag, green flag players, and Justin Jefferson is up next. And it's been a little disappointing with him and JJ McCarthy, highlighted by last week, where Jefferson did have 12 targets, just 4 for 37. There was some question with his effort on some plays. But we have seen the touchdowns this year are down for Jefferson, just 2. Now, both of them have come with J.J. McCarthy, but this is not what we expect for Justin Jefferson, who was drafted in the first 7 picks of drafts for the most part. I think there might have been some people who had concern with him and McCarthy, but others were like, hey, look at every quarterback that has been on this team. Jefferson has produced with all of them. It hasn't been great, again, with McCarthy. Are you concerned about Jefferson going forward, or do you feel that it will just take a little time with McCarthy and Jefferson trying to gain a rapport and some chemistry?
I am massively concerned, but this is in keeping with like the drum that I have been beating since the offseason, and not like to toot my own horn, but like I was pretty vocal about, hey, I don't think Justin Jefferson is a first round pick. Like, I don't think you should be drafting him in this spot because of the unknown with JJ McCarthy. And yes, he has scored the touchdowns with JJ McCarthy, but as as you guys talk about, I mean, touchdowns are fickle. They come and they go, but 95.4 yards per game is what Justin Jefferson has this year without JJ McCarthy. He has looked like himself when he's been playing with not JJ McCarthy. With JJ McCarthy, 52.3 receiving yards per game. He has not looked like himself with McCarthy, and that's not a Justin Jefferson thing. That is a JJ McCarthy thing. And until McCarthy develops within that offense, we cannot trust Justin Jefferson as we used to.
Yeah, it's been disappointing. I did not draft him this year. More so, I was just not in a spot to get him. I was willing to take him. It's just I either had like that top 3, top 4 pick where I wasn't taking him, or late first round where he wasn't there. He is 14th in points per game in PPR formats, but as you alluded to, a lot of that came with Carson Wentz as the quarterback. So you are disappointed right now if you drafted Jefferson, especially with some of those players around him putting up big numbers. George Kittle came back, wasn't heavily involved. We saw last week, finally, 3 red zone targets, one of his better games. We thought with the lack of quality receivers this year that maybe Kittle would be featured in the offense more, and we haven't really seen it until last week. He does have 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games, but one of those touchdowns came in National Tight End Week, which we knew that he was going to score. I did bet it for plus 185, and I don't bet a lot of touchdowns, but I figured Kittle was going to score that week. But how do you see Kittle going forward? Do you see him putting up more performances like we saw last week, or is just Christian McCaffrey such a focal point of the offense that there's going to be weeks where he just doesn't do enough?
Yeah, I mean, you love Kittle's talent, but I think inconsistency is what we're going to see week to week. And look at the extreme efficiency that he has had over the past 3 weeks. He has, like, in terms of targets, only one of them has not resulted in a reception. 18 targets, 17 receptions, 159 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, that is extreme efficiency that is going to regress at some point. And with Jauan Jennings getting healthier, with Ricky Pearsall getting healthier, Brock Purdy returning, like, there's a place for George Kittle in this offense, but week to week, it's not going to be predictable.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate because we've seen the efficiency throughout his career. It is there. Like I've always said, if he was featured like Travis Kelce, imagine the numbers he would put up. I mean, this guy only has 100 targets twice in his career. They came in 2018 and 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was hoping it would be better with the lack of receivers this year, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. That first game he came back, he was essentially an offensive lineman blocking that first week, and that's the other factor too. He's so good in the blocking in the run game that they tend to focus on that with him more. And it's just unfortunate because such a great talent. And we saw last year extreme efficiency. He was going in the third, fourth round. People got excited because of the injuries to the receivers, and we just haven't seen enough. I want to thank Matthew Freedman for joining me in the first hour. And in hour number 2, I will be joined by Dwain McFarland. He'll join us next for the water cooler here on Fantasy Life, Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Back here for hour number 2. It is Fantasy Life on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. I'm Adam Ronis, now joined by Dwain McFarland. He joins us every Tuesday, but we only get 15 to 20 minutes. Today, we get an entire hour with Dwain. What's up, Dwain?
What is up, Ronis? I am all yours. I came prepared to bicker like we're brothers. I just get so used to you and Kendall. I figure we'll just keep the vibes going. You know what I mean? I think people love y'all's vibe. So I hope I can live up to it. It's hard. Kendall's pretty awesome. So I'll do what I can.
She is. She is out sick today, so we hope she feels better. And she never takes a day off. So I was very surprised to see that this morning. She must be really sick.
Yeah, she must be. There's some stuff going around. I don't know what it is, like a respiratory thing. I was talking with a buddy from California yesterday, and he said he's been sick for 10 days. He said it's been tested. It's not COVID. It's not the flu. So yeah, get well soon.
In California, though, the weather's great. She's bragging about how warm it is.
Yeah, he's in California too.
I'm playing softball in 25-degree weather the past 3 days. I thought I was going to be the one out sick. But yeah, we hope she feels better. It is that time of year, though, where people get sick. It's also the time of year where we're pushing to make the fantasy football playoffs and win those championships. And that's what we do at fantasylife.com. So check out all of our content, including Dwain's utilization report, which you have to read that every single week. And, just give people a brief background on that and how it can help them. We know we talk about it every Tuesday, but maybe some people tune in for the first time. So give us some background on that and how it can help you.
Yeah, so the utilization report, it's something I started, I don't know, like 7 years ago, Ronis. Like you can go back in my Twitter account and see when I first started tweeting stuff and I would get like 1 like. But, I came from the data and analytics industry and I worked in the healthcare side of things. And so I would work with hospitals around what type of data did they need? What were the kind of problems they were trying to solve? And so I ran a product team there and some strategy stuff. And so I'd always been a big time fantasy player, like always playing, 15, 20 leagues. This is back pre-best ball. Now, when you talk to somebody, how many leagues you got? They're like, 400, because 350 of them are best ball. But this was just all managed league stuff, mostly mid, high stakes kind of stuff, real-time sports, FFPC, things like that. And I had done pretty well doing all my own projections and rankings. But one thing I always really focused on was like, player usage trends, things like that. So coming out of that background I had, and I understood, so much more about data, I just started thinking through, okay, like what's not in the marketplace that I just wish there was really something easy for. And so that turned into the utilization report. And ultimately, that's what we're doing. We're looking for trends over the last, 2 to 4 weeks, early in the season. Like we'll take a 1 week trend, Ronis in week 1. Not really a trend, but like we're just starving for anything and you get the big unveil. But as the season goes, we get injuries. We got to figure out who's replacing players. And so it's really all based around like that concept, like who are the players we should really be focused on. And then like over the last 2 years, like what I've really tried to do is like take it to another level that helps us understand, okay, based on their role and how they're performing, like what should we expect from them in the future? And that was the genesis of the utilization score. And basically I was looking for something, because guys, if you're stranded on an island and you have one thing you can use, it's fantasy points per game. It's really the most predictive of what's going to happen in the future for the player. So my goal was like, hey, can we create something that's actually more predictive than that? Like week over week, rolling 4 weeks over 4, that kind of thing. And that was the genesis of the utilization score. But the whole idea was so that I could give more analysis around range of outcomes, because I really feel like that's the frontier, Ronis, because like we can all give hot takes around what we think is going to happen, but how much variance matters in this game. Variance is so huge. So I just my goal is to provide analysis that's like, all right, here's the top end range for the player, here's the most likely range, and here's the bottom range. And then depending like on what the price tag is on that player, if you want to trade for them in your league, or maybe you're deciding to trade them away, it kind of gives you some analysis of like, okay, if I can only get this, that's probably a break even. I should just hold. But if I can sell them for this, that's probably his outlier top end. Maybe I should just lock in value now and make that trade. And then the vice versa, the other side of that would be, oh, people still value whatever this running back as a running back 3, and his ceiling now looks more like a running back 1, and he's probably a running back 2. Well, then that means I want to hold on to that player, or maybe I want to go trade for that player. So that's really like, man, that's my thing. That is like the thing I'm like constantly working on right now. And that's a big addition to the utilization report. So if you guys are into those sort of things, yeah, you can check it out for free over at fantasylife.com. We also have a complete suite of tools where you can look at how these players stack up for the season, the last 4 weeks, whatever time period you want. We give you guys all the flexibility you need.
Yeah, definitely encourage everyone to check it out, and you'll be back there every single day taking a look. We will take your calls, 888-963-2682. Let's look at some of the top news storylines and what maybe the utilization report can help us here. Mike Tomlin said that Jaylen Warren could see more touches in the coming weeks. I mean, the touches have been pretty decent for him lately. The last few games, 16, 18, 15, 20. We have seen the snap counts, though. Last week was just 46%, 52% for Kenneth Gainwell. Warren hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns. That's the only thing. 2 rushing touchdowns. They came in 1 game against Indianapolis. 1 receiving touchdown back in week 1. So that's been the thing that's holding him back. So it's more the offense. But how do you see Jaylen Warren going forward?
Yeah, I think what Mike Tomlin responded with is actually perfect. When you look at Jaylen Warren, it's not a matter of they're not giving him the role. They're giving him the role. Over the last 4 games, man, he's got 80% of the team's rushing attempts. So they have squarely put the rushing workload on his shoulders. The thing you have going on with the Steelers, it's really interesting, is number one, they don't get to the red zone that often, like 22% of the time. They're one of the bottom 6, 7 teams in the league at getting to the red zone. And then when they get there, Aaron Rodgers likes to throw the ball, and he's been efficient with it. Like Aaron Rodgers is throwing 2 passing touchdowns per game. I think that's a surprise. Most people wouldn't have thought that would be happening this year. And here lately, they've been using those tight ends, Ronis. Early in the year, it was really Warren and Gainwell for the underneath stuff. Now it's going more to Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, mostly Freiermuth. Freiermuth has been the guy that's really stepped up, and then they sprinkle in some Darnell Washington, who's like the mountain from Game of Thrones out there. See him next to guys that like come up to like his, like his knee pad. The guy's absolutely enormous. But we know how these things can go. Defenses are basically planning looking at the last 4 weeks of film. And so they're going to start to focus again more on the tight ends. And guess what that's going to mean? That's going to mean a lot of the underneath stuff's going to go back to Jaylen Warren in the pass game. So, yeah, I'm very bullish on Jaylen Warren. I wrote him up in the utilization report this week. All the underlying data actually suggests he could be more of a high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1. To your point, we just need the touchdowns. The one other factor that works against him, Ronis, is Arthur Smith, notorious for running very slow offenses, and so is Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Rodgers is that old school quarterback, wants to come to the line, wants to get a look at everything, change things. The defense changes things. He changes things again. The play clock, the average play clock remaining in neutral situations for the Steelers, they rank 31st out of 32 teams. So that's just basically, that's when the score is within 3 points. How much time is on the play clock when they snap the ball? They really drain the play clock. So that's the other thing that works against Warren. Like if he played in one of these fast-paced offenses, like he would already be a running back 1. If he was getting this workload working in a fast offense, he would already be a running back 1. But still very bullish on him, even though we have some of those factors working against him. He's due for some touchdown regression, because they've been giving him the carries more recently inside the 5. That was a Kenneth Gainwell thing early in the year. And now they seem to have decided that, Warren probably actually is the best man for the job once they get in close. So I think things will start to break his way. And, it's going to happen this weekend. You're playing the Bengals.
Yeah, plays per game is something I always look at. A lot of times people will be like, oh, I can't believe this guy only got like 8 touches. And then you go look and they only ran like 47 plays because they just didn't have the ball. And you mentioned Pittsburgh. They are last in the NFL in plays per game, 55, which is dead last. So, and that is so true about Aaron Rodgers. You see him, he goes up to the line of scrimmage, he checks out the defense, and then the play clock's running, and they just don't run a lot of plays. So that is definitely a big factor there for Pittsburgh. Devontae Adams didn't practice. He's expected to play. He had that oblique injury last week. And, Adams, what a season it has been for him so far. We usually say, oh, yeah, well, these touchdowns, they can't last. He has 9 touchdowns on 42 receptions. But I think we can make an exception here for Devontae Adams with the way this offense is targeting him in the red zone, right?
Yeah, and this one's so interesting because you can go all the way back to the first meeting the team had with Devontae Adams and the rest of the team. And if you remember this, Ronis, it kind of went viral on X and some other social media platforms. But it was Sean McVay basically just talking this guy up. And you saw Matthew Stafford just looking back at Devontae Adams. And the specific quote, from McVay was really tied to what he was going to do for them in the red zone and once they got inside the 10 and what it was going to mean for their offense. And so the Rams strategically made a decision to move on, from Cooper Kupp and bring in another veteran of similar age, but that they thought could just really be a different complement to what we see from Puka Nacua, because there was a lot of overlap between Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So you get now more versatility in your offense. And I'm with you. I don't think the touchdowns are going to slow down. I mean, he's averaging 1.8 end zone targets per game. That's the most in the NFL. The second closest player is George Pickens in Dallas, who has 1.4. So they are intentionally going to Adams all the time, but specifically once they get down inside the 10-yard line, a lot of those looks are going to him. Stafford's playing the best since we saw the Super Bowl season for the Rams. So much for that back injury that scared everyone in the preseason. Ronis has not been an issue at all. This is one of the best versions of the Rams offense that we've seen, and that's saying something. The Rams have had some really good offenses in the last 7 or 8 years under Sean McVay. I wouldn't say it's back to the elite Todd Gurley year, but I would say this is probably as good as the team that won the Super Bowl, at least on offense.
Stafford is the second in odds to win the MVP right now.
Yeah.
And that is just
Drake May's first, isn't he?
I know. Yes, he is first.
What a world. I love this. Yeah, it's great.
It is. It makes it very interesting. I mean, Mahomes is 3. Obviously, they can't push him too far down because then it becomes a liability for the books. Then money flows in. And that's why they don't want to do that. But it is a very interesting MVP race for sure. I mean, Drake May, I'm not surprised by what he was doing. He was definitely a quarterback I wanted. It's unfortunate. This probably happens to you, Dwain, where you really like a player and then you go look at your teams and you're like, wait, I only have 1 or 2 shares. How? I really like this guy. Does that happen to you? Because that was Drake May for me this year.
Yeah, because, it's variance, man. It's not just fantasy, it's life. You land in different draft rooms where people have different plans. Sometimes you're in draft rooms where people are sharper, less sharp. Drake May is one of the players I actually did get a ton of this year. He's my most rostered quarterback, but I've definitely had that work against me, right? I've definitely had players that I thought starting the, once you get into like the major part of draft season, say, start late July for us, right? And then getting in all through August and up to the final week of September, there are certain players that you do think, man, you're probably going to have 40%, maybe 50%. And then you do look down and you're like, oh, I have like 15%, 10% of this player. And it just really, it comes down to how those drafts end up playing out and your draft position. Sometimes you just get stuck at the wrong end of the board and you have to make a decision. Do you want to reach for a player? On a guy like May, I was able to do it this year because he was going later. So then I don't mind reaching as much, but it happens a lot more often to me on the top level players where you just get stuck at one end of the draft board on maybe like 65% of your drafts by chance. And so you don't get exposure to certain players. What's funny, though, is, Ron, sometimes that saves you. Sometimes that means you don't have a lot of Justin Jefferson. You know what I mean?
So that is true because it's funny that you say that because I was just talking about that with Freedman. I have no Jefferson this year, and a lot of it was draft spot. I was either getting like top 4, top 5 where I wasn't taking him, or the back end where he was gone. Yep. So, yeah, that is true. But I really wish I had more Drake May because I talked about him as a breakout. I actually had him ranked in my top 10 before the year. That's why it's perplexing why I don't have more. But my last draft, I said I am getting Drake May no matter what. I did. It is my best team, so at least I have that.
The Drake May one is really funny. I won't name the person's name, but there was a prominent fantasy analyst that came out when I was promoting.
Come on, Dwain. Throw him under the bus. Come on.
No. But I was promoting Drake May. And he did tell me I was a complete idiot. Why was I shilling Drake May? No one's drafting Drake May. Drake May is going to be meaningless this year. I have not added that person, but it crossed my mind.
Yeah, maybe when he wins MVP, maybe you should do it. That would be nice. Ricky Pearsall back at practice. So this is a guy I do have on a few teams, and I'm just like, he doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't played since September 28th. We've seen 2 100-yard games when he's played. The worst game he had in a PPR was 8.6, so he was productive. I know it depends on his health and how this knee is, but can Pearsall be a guy that you can count on down the stretch?
He's coming back to a little bit of a different offense, because we now have George Kittle. CMC is so well established. But I think, the more weapons that the 49ers have, like the better overall it will be for their offense. Mac Jones has played admirably, but I think I still see a higher ceiling with Brock Purdy, assuming he's healthy, right? And everything's good to go with him. But yeah, Pearsall, you talked about it, to open the year, gave you 14.8, 9.2, and 19.7 fantasy points in those 3 games where he was healthy. Was clearly taking his game to a new level. Had a 22% target share over that time. He had a utilization score of a 77, Ronis. And if you go back and look at the range of outcomes, now that's only 3 games, guys. So it's a small sample. It really starts to gain stability, the utilization score, around 4 games, but we're pretty close to that. So we go with what we have here. That's typically, like a mid-range wide receiver 2 with low-end wide receiver 1 upside. And like in the worst case, you've got a high-end wide receiver 3. So we'll see how much rust there is, how conditioned he is. There's certainly factors that could hamper him a little bit, like early in his return. But if we see him come out and look 100%, and here's the positive on that. Kyle Shanahan has openly stated that, look, we're not trying to bring guys back if they can't hit certain speeds and do certain things in practice. And so I lean towards Ricky Pearsall being closer to 100% based on those comments that we've heard from their coaching staff and the way that it seems the 49ers have tried to adapt their training plan. And thank God, does any team suffer more injuries besides them?
No.
I know the Chargers some years it feels like they're very snake bitten as well, but man, the 49ers through the years, what happens, especially to their skill players, they just suffer so many injuries. And this year, a lot of it has come on defense.
Yeah, no, that is true. They every year it feels like they are among the top for most injured players. Let's head to the phone lines, take a couple calls real quickly. Let's go to Eddie in California. Eddie, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? I have a starter sit question. I need to start one. I need to sit one of these wide receivers between Troy Franklin, P.J. Washington, and Tez Johnson. And also, since you were talking about Stafford, I have a decision between Stafford and Dak Prescott as a QB.
All right, Dwayne, Stafford going against Seattle, probably one of the tougher matchups he had, or Dak Prescott going up against Vegas. Which direction would you go?
Yeah, I do have Dak slightly ahead this week. It's still a close call. While I do respect the Seattle defense, I'm not scared of it, especially for the Rams. Now let's keep an eye on the Devontae Adams stuff, but him coming in questionable would be just enough for me to lean to Dak in this one. You're playing the Raiders, the Cowboys. They've been a little more balanced here recently, but you've got Lamb. We know that Pickens is healthy. You got Ferguson. You're coming off the bye week. You should be rested. So I slightly lean to Dak here, but it's still close.
And a receiver was, I think it was Franklin. Was it Parker Washington, I believe, and Tez Johnson? And we know Parker Washington didn't practice yesterday with a hamstring injury. So I always say, you can't make these decisions so early in the week. You have no one playing tonight. So let's assume Washington plays. Which one of the 3 would you go with?
Yeah, in that case, I am going Washington. I'm looking at the start sit tool right now on fantasylife.com, which uses our projections. So it looks at their ceiling score, their median projection, as well as their bust. And then it looks at the rank across all of our rankers. So we got a lot of things factored in here, but it does have Parker Washington, in the lead spot. I didn't hear what scoring format that was. So I've got PPR up right now, but it's going to be the same for half because he's ahead of his Xfinity best score, right? So his ceiling is 18.8 versus 17.2 for Troy Franklin versus 16.3 for Tez. And he also has the better median projection. So, and actually this is one of those cases where he projects better across all of these. Rankers, it's very close. We've got Parker Washington 35, Troy Franklin 34, Tez Johnson 33. So it's really a tier. So I do lean to Washington, but to your point, gotta watch the practice reports. We got to know if he's a full practice by Friday, right? I feel really good about it. If he is not practicing in their calling him questionable, well, I'm going to be updating these projections and I'm going to be docking Parker Washington. And in that case, I would say Troy Franklin or Tez Johnson go into your lineup. And neither one of them have great matchups, this week, but they're also very similar. I have a slight lean to Franklin. How about you, Ronis?
Yeah, I agree on Franklin as well. I mean, he's been right there with Cortland Sutton in targets over the last few games, which is kind of surprising. I know Sutton gets the top cover corners, so that could be a factor, but Franklin has been making plays. Let's go to Chris in North Carolina.
Yeah, hi. Start sick question. I have do I start Drake May or Dak Prescott? I do have CeeDee Lamb as my receiver if that matters. And a trade question, if you could.
Dwayne, I'm going Drake May. How about you?
Yep, Drake May. Let's hear the trade question.
Would you trade Devontae Adams for Rashee Rice?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I know your answer. Yeah, I would too, right?
Yep, I would.
Yeah.
I love Devontae Adams, but give me Rashee Rice.
Yeah, Rice is just getting so many targets in this offense. They're coming off the bye too, another week of getting healthy as well. So, yeah, definitely would make that trade. All right, when we return, it's time for the Trust Meter presented by Vanacream. We'll talk about several players and where does Dwayne stand on the trust level for this week. That is ahead. It is Fantasy Life here on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Back here, Fantasy Life, Adam Ronis and Dwain McFarland getting you ready for week 11 of the fantasy football season. And right now it's time for the Trust the Meter presented by Vanacream. So Dwayne is going to rate players on the Vanacream Trust the Meter for this week and how much he trusts to start them on a scale of 1 to 10. So Dwayne, we're going to start with Chase Brown of the Bengals.
Yeah, let's go with an 8. Look, I mean, again, this is contingent on Samaje Perine being out. He's got a high ankle sprain. He's considered week to week. As far as we know, he's not playing, Ronis. But in that last game before their bye week, we just saw Chase Brown in the role that he had last year at the end of the season when he completely smashed all expectations. This is a team that's actually willing to give some. He had a 95% snap share in that game. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. That's not sustainable. And you're probably right. But if you go back and look at the end of last year, like this guy was regularly at the 80 to 90% snap share range. So, really good for him. Not a great matchup. Minus 3.2 fantasy boost facing the Pittsburgh Steelers. So like the 6th or 7th toughest matchup for running backs. But man, the offense is so much better with Joe Flacco. He's getting targeted in the pass game. So even if they manage to take away the ground game, like Chase Brown's going to give you that floor just due to, his receptions, Ronis. I got a median projection of 15.3 and an Xfinity best ceiling of 24 with a floor of 11.2. So that's what you call an 8.
Yeah, we want to see those receptions pile up, especially as you mentioned with that Samaje Perine out a total of 48.5 in that game. And we saw these teams on that Thursday night a few weeks ago put up 64 combined points. So that's what we're all hoping for again. And if for that to happen on the other side, we have Jaylen Warren. So what is the number for him on the trust meter?
Yeah, I would say he's at a 7. We just talked about him earlier, so I won't go back into all of it. But look, he's gotten 80% of the rush share over the last 4 weeks, and now you're in a matchup where you're expected to smash. Should be a lot of points for the Steelers in this particular game. So yeah, I would go with a 7 on Mr. Jaylen Warren. He's got a ceiling also of 24 points. His median's slightly lower than what we just talked about with Chase Brown, but really in the same ballpark. I would go 1 notch lower on Jaylen Warren.
We've had to wait for a lot of rookies this year. TreVeyon Henderson's a guy that has popped over the last couple games. We've seen flashes from RJ Harvey due to touchdowns. And JK Dobbins, there's been talk that he could potentially land on injured reserve. Sean Payton talked as if he is going to miss this week and said Harvey will see an increase in touches. So what is the number on the trust meter for RJ Harvey this week going up against Kansas City?
It's a little tougher on the trust meter just because it's Sean Payton and it's the first game without Dobbins. And Sean Payton's historically known for just pulling shenanigans, at the running back position. Having said that, they've got a 2nd-round pick invested in RJ Harvey. I think he takes over most of Dobbins' role and probably keeps the role he already had as far as his work in the passing game. So I think he probably is at a minimum, Ronis, 50% of the attempts, I've got him projected for 55, and I feel pretty good about that. I've got him at a 12% target share. Depending on how the game goes, the way our range of outcome stuff works in the projections, that comes out to 15 to 18 opportunities. We're talking about a guy that when he's gotten, listen to this, 7 opportunities between rushing attempts, just 7, guys, this is a very low bar, 7 opportunities between rushing attempts and targets this year. He's averaged 17.1 fantasy points in those games. So he's shown us, right, that he can be a very productive player when given the opportunity. Chiefs are the 6th hardest running back matchup, minus 3.3 fantasy boost. So that's enough to make him a 6 and not a 7. Go a little lower than what I had just before with Jalen Warren, what I had with Chase Brown. But still, I want him in my lineups, Ronis. There's a really big ceiling here. Our Xfinity best ceiling is 24.1 on Mr. RJ Harvey. So I will be answering start to almost every start-sit question with RJ Harvey this week.
A lot of people were starting him in the previous few weeks based on the touchdowns, and we were warning, be very careful of that. But yeah, now there looks like there's going to be an opportunity for double-digit touches, so you definitely feel better about him this week. How do we feel about Quinshon Judkins right now? Early in the year, it felt great. You thought you might have had a big difference maker in the double-digit rounds, and then we've kind of seen some underwhelming performances. He's been under 4 yards per carry in the last 4 games. We know game script is important as well. He did face Baltimore in his first game, which was week 2. He had 10 carries for 61 yards, 3 catches for 10 yards, where clearly he was limited because it was his first game of the season. But where does Judkins rank on the trust meter this week?
Yeah, I would say Judkins is 5.5. So here's the good thing with him. Well, number one, guys, we all love efficiency. We talk about it, but it's the least predictive stuff out there. Number one, it doesn't tie strongly to fantasy production. The volume is much more important. And then number two, the week over week stability of efficiency is just, it's low. I mean, it's a thing where we care about it, but it's more of a small tiebreaker thing than what it gets and what it ends up getting made into in a lot of fantasy analysis, based on the research, that I've done. So I think this is the positive thing. The bad part for Judkins is we know he's not involved in the receiving game. If a game script goes sideways, that will get him. However, if we look at what he's done, since he's taken over as the starter, Ronis, number one, 81% of their carries, right? So he's getting all the work on the ground. Over that span, he's averaged 18.6 attempts and 2 targets. Okay, I did exclude the one game where he got knocked out with the shoulder injury 2 weeks ago before their bye week. But if we look at that, he's still getting 18 to 19 opportunities, even in these bad game scripts, because he gets so many carries. So there's just too much volume there to ignore. And I think he's already proven that even in these bad game scripts, he's getting his carries, even though he can't pile onto the top of it with more receptions because they like to use Dylan Sampson. They mix in Jerome Ford a little bit. But I've got him as a mid-range running back too. I think he does have running back 1 upside in this matchup. The Ravens have really struggled, against the run this year. So I would put him at a 5, lower than the other guys. The main reason is he doesn't have that passing down role, and it can get sideways on you, but still very, very good touch floor, even though he's not involved in the receiving game.
After week 4, when Woody Marks had 21 touches, everyone said, all right, that's it. Marks is taking over the backfield. Then the next week, he had 7 touches. But he has been playing more snaps than Nick Chubb pretty much every week since then. And last week, a season high, 80% of the snaps, just 13% for Nick Chubb. Chubb was on the injury report last week, but he did practice. I believe it was full on Friday, was good to go, and only had 5 carries in the game. So is this the beginning of Marks taking over? Where does Marks stand on the trust meter this week?
Yeah, Marks is a really difficult player to figure out. So last week, we also had that massive trailing game script, right? And we know he gets the passing down work. They were trying to come back against the Jaguars, which Davis Mills did a very, very good job of helping lead them to that. What a meltdown by the Jaguars and their defense. At the end of that game, Liam Cohen just throwing the headset and everything down. That's what I would have done as a coach. I might have done it a minute before the end of the game, to be honest. But it makes it tough to know for sure with Marks, because if they do get into a leading game script, I think that, Chubb is still going to have a role, but I think it's safe for us at this point. If we look over since Woody Marks became a thing in week 4, he's got a 58% snap share in 3 of those 6 games. He monopolized the backfield, like you said, last week. He gave you 16.1 fantasy points. And I think the good news for him it's kind of the opposite of Judkins. Like, he's a little more secure against bad game scripts because he gets out there and, he's going to do his thing in the pass game. But if they get into a lead, that's where it could be problematic, for him this week. So we'll see what happens with them. But I would put him at a 4, maybe 3.5. Like, he's tougher to trust, like still has a really good ceiling and everything this week. It's like 18.5 fantasy points in a PPR. So like, Woody Marks is a guy you're very interested in having in your lineup. You just have to acknowledge, like, it's easier for him to bust. So if you're choosing between him and some of those other guys we've talked about, I'm clearly leaning to the other guys.
I needed that number to be higher. I have to start him. So hopefully it works out for me.
Still a good ceiling though. Good ceiling, just a lower floor.
Yeah. This one's going to be the fun one. AJ Brown. I think everyone doesn't want to start him right now. We know what's going on with him. And his comments on the stream saying, if you have me in fantasy, drop me. Coming off a game with 3 targets, 2 catches for 13 yards in one of the best games of the week. Lions-Eagles Sunday night. Total of 46.5 there. Eagles favored by 2.5. So AJ Brown on the trust meter for this week against Detroit.
I'm going to put AJ Brown at a 5.5 this week. So I would start him over Woody Marks, like if I had to make that choice. So here's one little nugget for you guys. Also, if you like to bet props, against man coverage, AJ Brown has a 35% target share this season. Detroit runs the 4th most man coverage. AJ Brown against zone, that's been his problem, which most of the league runs zone. 70% of coverage is zone coverage. He has a 20% target share against zone. And so you're getting to play a matchup that should push for points. The Lions, as good as the Eagles defense is, they're still going to score points. Maybe not as much as what we're used to, but they're going to push the Eagles offense. You saw the Eagles offense with the Packers all banged up on Monday night. Like, essentially they were saying, we're just not going to lose the game. Jalen Hurts threw a ball so far out of bounds, it went in the stands. Like, that's how safe they were playing. They didn't even want anyone on the sideline to intercept the ball. I think they're going to be pushed out of that this week, Ronis. 3.98 yards per route run this year for A.J. Brown against man coverage. One of the best in the league. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba's above him. There's a few other guys, but still really cooking in that department. And also, the flip side of that is true. Devontae Smith, much better against the zone stuff, which is why he's the leader for the team. You mostly face zone coverage. That's why he's the leader for the team right now. But I actually like this spot this weekend. Plus, that feels like a squeaky wheel. When players take to social media, it's just like a coach going to a press conference and talking about how a player needs to perform better. They're trying to manipulate the situation. That's what A.J. Brown's doing. When he comes out and says things like that, he's like, okay, guys, like, I'm happy to be here. We're winning. Throw me the ball. Just throw me the ball. And I think he's going to get the ball this weekend.
Troy Franklin's been getting the ball quite a bit lately, at least 8 targets in 4 straight games, 4 touchdowns in the last 4, going up against Kansas City this week. So where does Troy Franklin stand on the trust meter?
I'm going to put him around a 4. Not a great matchup against the Chiefs, but not an insurmountable one. And to your point earlier, Courtland Sutton often gets the best coverage. He's the guy that typically gets the better corner. Now, this is not a team that lets everybody travel, so Denver can really dictate the matchups they want to get to here. I would have probably had him at a 5 and a little bit better matchup, and we also have the chance that Marvin Mims is back this week. So if we look at these games without Marvin Mims, we've actually seen Troy Franklin's route participation closer to 90%. In those games where we've had Mims, it dips down to 75%. And, being on the field is the number one thing, Ronis. We got to be on the field to get the fantasy points. So a little bit of additional risk there. He could continue on the same. Guys, he did have games earlier in the season where he had that 85-90% route participation in games with Marvin Mims. We had just seen him kind of fall into more of a rotation over the 3 or 4 games before his resurgence over the last 2 weeks. So I would go with a 4 on this one.
Colston Loveland obviously had the huge game against the Bengals. Cole Kmet got injured in that game. Kmet was back last week. We saw 4 targets, 4 catches for 55 yards. Loveland played 62% of the snaps, 66% for Cole Kmet, going up against Minnesota this week. So where do you have Colston Loveland on the trust meter?
This is a 2. I would rather bench him. You had Cole Kmet back, 56% route participation last week for Loveland. Look, guys, We still know that Colston Loveland is a good player. Like, he ranked very, very highly in the rookie supermodel, which is something we use at Fantasy Life that I built. That's just designed to like look at all the things that are the most transferable over to the NFL game and how well they predict future production. And it looks at film. It looks at adjusted things like their opponent, their team, how good their teammates were on their team, the quarterback they played with, all these things in college. And Loveland is the third highest graded tight end since I've been doing that, which goes back to 2018. So the talent's there, but man, I would just really rather not play him this week. I will say this, like if I was forced to decide between like Loveland and picking up like a tight end that I was going to stream that I didn't like as much, and if my team's in a decent position, like if maybe I'm 6-4, 7-3, and I need to use Loveland because maybe I have Jauan Johnson, maybe I have, Tyler Warren on bye. I probably stick with Loveland just because, like, if he has the big game, like, there's so much value in potentially trading him after this game. So if it's a close call, I would go with him versus like lesser names that might just have a decent matchup this week. But otherwise, like, I just really don't want him in my lineup if possible.
Vanicream gives guys no nonsense, fragrance-free care designed for sensitive skin because even guys need a little help. When we return, we'll take a look at some matchup highs and lows for the week and some player props from Dwain McFarland. That is ahead. Fantasy Life on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Mike's Hard Lemonade is partnering with Matthew Berry and Fantasy Life to give away weekly prizes all season long, including a trip to this year's big game. Prizes include Fantasy Life Plus subscription, gift cards to New Era, Homage, and Knockaround, TVs, soundbars, and 2 tickets to the big game. And not only have Fantasy Life and Mike's Hards partnered for the sweepstakes, but we've also collaborated on a new 12-pack of exclusive flavors, including Hard Pink Pick 6, Hard Pineapple Rush, Hard Berry Blitz, and Hard Apple Tackle. So go to mikeshard.com/sweepstakes/Fantasy Life today, enter the sweepstakes, and go find the Mike's Hard Fantasy Life 12-pack at a store near you. 21 plus only, premium malt beverage, Mike's Hard Lemonade Co., Chicago, Illinois. No purchase necessary to enter sweepstakes. See official rules at mikeshard.com/sweepstakes/Fantasy Life. Back here, Fantasy Life. Adam Ronis, Dwain McFarland on a Thursday. And Dwain's got a couple of player props. I see Dwain out there on X putting out his bets every week. He's getting into it. I love to see it. I'm big into the betting space, so giving out picks every week as well, so I like to see it. So I see you got a play that you like on T. Higgins, and I like this too because the first time the Bengals played the Steelers, I played this. I think that week it might have been like 46.5. It was ridiculously low, and I was like, yeah, this is too easy here. And of course, he cashed on it. But what do you see with T. Higgins? I'm seeing the number. Wow, I'm seeing it really vary. I'm seeing, is this right, at 54.5? And then I see 59.5, 60.5. So what did you see it at originally? Because it seems like it's moving.
Yeah, so we pull an aggregate behind the scenes that I pull into the projection model so I can like see the stuff later in the week. Like my goal with the projection model, right, is ultimately to be nailing these props before they come out. And then that way, Ronis, makes it super easy. So when you see the outliers, based on some additional factors we may be using that, some of the odds makers are not, or maybe they don't lean into them as much as we do based on some research that we've done behind the scenes. And that's T. Higgins. So across the marketplace, I see T. Higgins right now. This is updated as of like 5 minutes ago at 58.75. It has moved up a little bit. But I've got him projected for 68.8. So it really depends like on the odds and where you're getting this. But the main thing I focus on is I just put out the players that I have projected for quite a bit more, right, than what the market has. I'll do it on the unders too, but people like the overs. People like to bet the overs. So I focus a lot of my time on the overs. I've done pretty well with it, winning on the season by a pretty decent margin. Last week was 500. But what I like about this one is what you just mentioned, the matchup that we already had earlier in the season, Ronis. But the other thing again, when we're doing these things, guys, what we care about are the outlier edges. When you get to face defenses that really do something a lot, or they're really good or they're really bad, we don't care so much about all the stuff in the middle. We waste way too much time talking about all the middle matchups in fantasy. To be honest, it's really the edge cases that matter. And when you look at T. Higgins, here's the thing, man, 30% target share against man coverage this season, only 13% against zone. And so you're playing against the Steelers, who run the third most man coverage. And to your point, T. Higgins has already roasted them. So yeah, I like the over, and maybe you guys can find it lower than this, so I would definitely shop it. But the aggregate is at 58.75, and I've got him almost at 69 yards.
Sorry, yeah, I just bet it right now because I got it at 54.5 on BetMGM at minus
Love
115. So jump in there now if you have access to that, if you want that, because these lines move, and especially we're on Thursday. You should see the movement from, because I tend to give out plays like Friday. By the time Friday to Sunday morning, sometimes you really lose out on a good number, and it makes a big difference. I remember the Marcus Mariota Monday night game. I gave out his rushing yards on a Friday at over 26.5 yards. I think it closed at 28.5. He had 28. So
yeah, try to bet your overs early unless they have to do with injury news that you're waiting on, and then you bet your unders late, because typically the market steams things right on the unders. The only way you might bet an under is if you had inside track on some injury information or something of a player returning that might hurt a player. But as a rule of thumb, I try to bet unders as late as possible, and you try to bet your overs as early as possible.
Yeah, I did that last night in the NBA. Jonathan Kuminga was dealing with a knee injury. He was not playing well. He did play. He left the game with injury. I had the under, easy cash. So that's the way to do it. Bijan Robinson, man, people are really frustrated with him. I guess because it was a nationally televised game. Like, this has kind of been going on all year. The one thing that stood out last week, though, was the lack of involvement in the passing game. Just 2 targets, 2 catches for 4 yards. That's not been the case this year. You're looking at his receiving yards this week. So what do you see there?
Yeah, right now the aggregate market has it at 36.9, and that's pulling across like 8 sources, guys. I have him projected for 50.2. He's averaged 51.9. Like he's the reason Bijan Robinson is not getting some of the carries inside the 10-yard line is A, because Tyler Algier is actually good in that role, and they can save some workload off of Bijan. I get it. We want the touchdowns as fantasy managers. It frustrates me as much as it does you. But the part of the reason they're doing that is because they are feeding him so much, Ronis, in the passing game. And here's the thing on Bijan. He is playing the Carolina Panthers. They run the second most zone coverage, always in zone coverage, 82% of the time. Bijan's target share against zone coverage this year, 24%. Guys, that's insanity. That's a wide receiver 1 target share, okay? And he's a 10% target share against man coverage. And honestly, guys, if you want one big macro takeaway from this segment, it is that against man coverage, mostly running backs and tight ends go down. There are exceptions like Trey McBride, but against zone coverage, their targets go up, because what happens? The zone is really trying to protect, quite often, the deep parts of the field. Well, who's open? It's the running back underneath. It's the tight end, which most of them have low average depth of targets. That's why I say it depends. If you have a tight end that works down the field, they'll be working into the zone coverage, so they may not have the same kind of splits. But really love Bijan. Again, guys, 50.2 is what I have it projected at. The market's at 36.9. Like that's a big number. And this is one I've bet like 6 times this year, and it's hit 5 of 6. So Bijan is just in a bigger receiving role than what the market is giving him credit for. They're still anchoring too much to like the way these projections work and the way the books do it. Part of how you find your edge is understand how they're projecting versus what you're doing. And you need to know that. But a big part of it is they still are anchoring to what he did in the previous years, in my opinion, too much for this version of what we've seen from the Falcons this year.
We'll come back. We'll wrap it up. We'll take a look at the Thursday night game between the Patriots and Jets. It's Fantasy Life on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Fantasy Life here, wrapping it up. We've got Thursday night football tonight. The Patriots hosting the Jets. New England favored by 12.5. Game total of 42.5. We spoke about Drake May. We're starting him. It's great if you have him. TreVeyon Henderson's been a guy that you've touted a lot this year. You felt better the last couple weeks, but if Terrell Jennings is active tonight, how do you think that impacts Henderson?
So Jennings still number 1. Thanks for calling that out, Ronis. I really do appreciate it.
Calling what
that
out?
was definitely a massive miss on TreVeyon.
No, I'm not calling you out. I'm joking
with you. I know you. I know you're not. Look, people, don't get me wrong. Like I've just owned it. I've made fun of myself all season, and it comes down to like the coaching staff decided they didn't want to give the man the ball. We can't see what's going on in practice. Maybe he was fumbling every other play. Maybe he's late to meetings. Maybe he doesn't know the play. But who knows? I'm not saying any of those things are true, but there's something. And you've got a coaching staff that historically has been willing to go with a rotation, and that really got that caught TreVeyon. But this week with Terrell Jennings back, knowing that he's still dealing with the knee injury, though, Ronis, like I still am leaning into TreVeyon Henderson. I've got him projected for 15.1 fantasy points tonight with Terrell Jennings getting 25% of the carries. Okay. So I still have more going to TreVeyon, less going to Jennings. But like if Jennings is really healthy, like it could be more like a 50-40 kind of thing. Like it's still in the range of outcomes. So I have him as a high-end running back too, but if you wanted to play it more conservative and you wanted to treat him more like a mid-range running back too, I think that's perfectly fine. So what that would do is that means and I'm just looking at projections, not even my rankings right now. That would mean you would still start DeAndre Swift over him. You would start Kyron Williams over him. I have him ahead of those two players right now. But it's still very close. So I really like TreVeyon. I think high-end running back 2 to mid-range running back 2, and folks can make their decisions based off of that.
Henderson's rushing prop anywhere from 75.5 to 79.5 rushing yards on.
That's pretty high.
It is very high.
It's getting pretty high. I wouldn't bet that.
Who else do you like in tonight's game?
I think Stephon Diggs, is an interesting player. Like route participation's really been the limiter, but he is the best receiver they have. So I do like him tonight. I've got him as like a borderline wide receiver 2. And then you also have Mac Hollins, who's playing the booty role. Normally, if you say someone's playing the booty role, you would think like they stink. But in this case, like that just means the guy that Drake May is going to take his shots downfield to. Look, historically, like if you look at Mac Hollins, he's just a guy that teams that run the ball all the time, they love. Like when the Bills turned to a run-heavy team, they went and got Mac Hollins. This year you've got it, with the Patriots. I'm trying to think of the team before that. The Falcons. Like Arthur Smith loved Mac Hollins because this dude is a tight end blocking on a corner. But like his forte is getting deep, man. And Drake May is pushing the ball deep down the field as much as anyone. So if you're in a pinch, I think Hollins is a boom-bust wide receiver 4 this week. Ronis could come up with that touchdown for you.
Quickly, are you playing anyone on the Jets tonight?
I think the only person you're really interested in playing is Breece Hall. And it's a tough matchup, but he's good as a receiver. The problem is, Ronis, they don't play him enough on receiving downs. They're letting Isaiah Davis take it. So I've got him at a 12.3 projection. That's 21 on the week.
Let's hope we get a good game. I wouldn't count on it, but make sure you check us out, fantasylife.com. Check out Dwayne's ranking, the utilization report, and a lot more. That wraps it up. I'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, here on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio.